We've been asking the wrong question about the samurai. We always ask, what was it like to be a samurai? The real, more terrifying question is, how did they get here? How did a class of warriors, whose name literally means to serve, become the absolute masters of Japan for 700 years? This isn't a story about a single battle. It's a story about economic collapse, political failure, and the most successful corporate takeover in history. This is the story of how the samurai rose from provincial hired guards to the shoguns in the shadows, pulling the strings of an emperor. Our story starts in the 8th and 9th centuries. The imperial court in Kyoto was the brilliant, shining center of Japan. They modeled their entire government on the incredible Tang dynasty in China, a highly centralized, bureaucratic state. But there was a problem. Japan wasn't China. The system was brittle. And then they made a fatal error. To encourage people to open up new farmland, the court passed a reform saying, if you reclaim the land, you can own it privately. It sounded like good economics. It was a political disaster. As historian Karl F. argues, this created a new class of super-rich provincial landowners. They had the wealth, but they lacked one thing: protection. The imperial army was a conscript force, poorly trained, unmotivated, and designed for show, not war. So these landowners did what any rational billionaire would do. They hired a private security force. The first real test came in the wild north against the Emishi people. The Emishi were master horsemen and guerrilla fighters. The clumsy imperial infantry was useless. So the court had to turn to these private warriors, these bushi, who could fight the Emishi on their own terms, on horseback, with bow and arrow. The state had just outsourced its most vital function, the monopoly on violence. Enter the Heian period. The court in Kyoto is writing poetry, wearing 12-layered robes and slowly going bankrupt. To keep powerful families happy, the emperor offered them the ultimate deal: tax exemptions. Think about that. The government, bleeding money, decides to stop taxing its richest citizens. It's a death spiral. The treasury empties, the national army is disbanded, and law and order completely break down. Into this power vacuum step two family corporations, the Tira and the Minamoto. It's critical to understand these weren't just local thugs. They were often descended from lesser princes of the imperial family itself, sidelined from succession and sent to the provinces. They had royal blood, immense land wealth, and now a private military. They were hybrid aristocrat warlord CEOs. The emperor, utterly dependent on them to put down rebellions and even collect taxes, granted them official titles. They were now inside the system, and they were ready to tear it apart from within. The tension exploded into the Genpei War from 1180 to 1185. The Taira clan had achieved the ultimate hostile takeover. They had married into the imperial family and effectively held the emperor hostage. For the Minamoto, led by the coldly strategic Minamoto no Yoritomo, this was the final provocation. The war was brutal and total. It wasn't just two armies clashing. It was a battle for the soul of the Japanese state. The climax was the naval battle of Dan no Ura. The Taira were utterly destroyed. Their leadership was slaughtered. Their grandmother, holding the child emperor, Antoku, leaped into the sea with him, drowning the boy and supposedly taking the sacred imperial regalia with her. It was a symbolic end, the old order literally sinking beneath the waves. Yoritomo now had absolute power, but he was a businessman at heart. He didn't want to destroy the company. He wanted to be the CEO. So in 1185, he didn't overthrow the emperor. He made the emperor an offer he couldn't refuse. He had himself appointed Sei Taishogun, barbarian subduing generalissimo. It was an old, dusty title that he filled with terrifying new meaning. He then did something genius. He didn't set up his government in the ancient capital of Kyoto. He built his headquarters in Kamakura, far away from the decadent court. This was the Kamakura Shogunate. As scholar Geoffrey P. Mass detailed, Yoritomo installed his loyal followers as shugo, military governors, and jitō, land stewards, in every province. These men collected the taxes, enforced the law, and commanded the troops. The emperor in Kyoto remained, a figurehead for ceremony and religion, but the real power, the money, and the swords, now resided in Kamakura with the shogun. The servants were now the masters. The samurai had completed their takeover. This system of dual power, an emperor who reigned and a shogun who ruled, would define Japan for the next 685 years. Everything that follows, the Mongol invasions, the epic civil wars, the isolation under the Tokugawa, stems from this fundamental shift in power that Yoritomo engineered. The samurai's journey from servant to shogun is the ultimate story of a power vacuum and the pragmatic, ruthless people who fill it. They didn't win because they had a sharper sword. They won because they had a better system. What do you think? Was Yoritomo a genius strategist or the ultimate opportunist? And what other rise-to-power stories would you like us to break down? Let us know in the comments. If you want to dive deeper, I highly recommend checking out the books by Karl F and Geoffrey P. Mass. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.